Hey folks, I sat down to do an interview today, and unfortunately my guest is not going to make it, so I thought I would actually spend a little bit of time with you going through a pretty interesting newspaper article from Popular Mechanics back in their December 1991 issue, back when a magazine cost $1.95. And this has to do with a top secret aircraft that was being developed at the time, known as the TR3A. Some have known potentially or heard of the TR3B and the Aurora from Lockheed Martin. So I thought I would just jump in, share this newspaper or magazine article with you, and just read through it together. It's pretty interesting, and I think puts things into perspective considering that 1991 was, well, a good 30 years ago now. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If you're liking these interviews, these discussions and videos, think about subscribing to the show, maybe throw a like on this video and hit that notification bell. Definitely helps me out. We're trying to get right now, break that 100 subscriber number, and we're sitting right at 69. So I kind of don't want to break that streak, but why don't we push it over to 70? How's that sound? I'm going to go ahead and share that TR3A PDF. Now, as you can see here, this is from Popular Mechanics, December 1991. Some pretty cool cars or a car here up in the right. And this is about the war on crime, new high-tech weapons in the law's arsenal. Scrolling down, I did want to note the author of this, which we'll get to in a moment, a pretty interesting graphic here for the TR3A, the Air Force's highly classified TR3A tactical reconnaissance plane, may have supported the F-117A in raids in the Persian Gulf. America's new secret aircraft, the TR-3A. This bizarre aircraft glimpsed in California's desert skies may herald a new generation of American air power. This is by Gregory T. Pope, with illustrations by none other than the renowned Mark McCandlish. Not to be confused with Nick Pope, another well-known writer in this space, in the aerospace area. But this is by Gregory T. Pope. So let's just get right into the article together. At midnight, traffic along Highway 138 has all but died. The moon has yet to emerge, but stars shed enough light to silhouette the Joshua trees that dot the desert and the Techapachi Mountains that rise to the north. 20 miles to the southeast, the city lights of Lancaster throw a faint orange tint on the corner of the sky. Grasshoppers wheeze, pocket mice scuffle in the sand. A faded ranch sign creaks in the wind. Otherwise, everything is silent. On nights like this, men and women have stood here and stared at the sky looking for aircraft that officially do not exist. Some watchers spend the night and leave unrewarded, but others tell stories of lights that streak and maneuver across the heavens at impossible speeds. Or triangle shapes that prowl silently overhead. Any of our coast-to-coast fans may remember that Art Bell described out in his home near Pahrump, Nevada, how he and his wife were driving home one night, and all of a sudden all the stars disappeared, and there was a massive black triangle about the size of a football field that just slowly, close enough to throw a rock at it, he described, floated over them and disappeared. And some think that this may be a similar craft. This corner of California's high desert, known as Antelope Valley, has long served as a testing ground for ultra-classified or black aircraft. From the P-59 Air Comet, America's first jet, to the F-117A stealth fighter. Not only does the valley host Edwards Air Force Base, Air Force Plant Number 42, and associated contractor facilities, but test flight paths from nearby China Lake Naval Weapons Center and Air Force's Nellis Air Force Range in Nevada bring aircraft through restricted airspace into Antelope Valley. Secrets stay closely held here. Those who know won't break their security vows. Those who think they've glimpsed the truth in the dark skies spoke anonymously to Popular Mechanics, fearing reprisal in an area where the aerospace industry dominates employment. In the words of one local journalist, chasing secret activity is like trying to catch smoke in a bottle. Moving on to the next page here. America's new secret aircraft. It's no secret, however, that in the past decade, the Department of Defense has poured money into black programs. The Air Force alone has spent nearly $46 billion on classified weapons procurement over the past 5 years, and another $20.3 billion in classified research and development, according to an analysis by the Defense Budget Project, a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C. But tracing the flow of classified funds from the Pentagon to contractors reveals little about hardware. Eyewitness reports, even from unqualified observers, tell us more. And a nagging consistency ties together accounts from individual eyewitnesses and lends credibility to their claims. The vehicles in such anecdotes fall into 3 categories. First, observers have reported several different triangle-shaped aircraft with wingspans ranging from 60 to 160 feet. Second, eyewitnesses have described a high-speed, high-altitude vehicle seen only as a yellow or orange light with a related pulsing engine roar. Finally, a black, silent, boomerang-shaped vehicle stretches between 600 and 800 feet across and performs circus pony maneuvers at airspeeds as low as 20 knots. Asked to comment, Air Force Systems Command referred the inquiry to a Pentagon-based public affairs officer, Captain Betsy Freeman, who issued this statement: "We have no aircraft matching those descriptions." You can see this image here of one of the planes based on observers' descriptions, rounded surface marks on the TR3A, which also may have an inwardly canted vertical control surface. At the end of this, I'll probably talk about the B-2 stealth bomber as well, which has some pretty interesting technology related to that. But let's continue on. Black wings, reports of the triangular planes come from the best qualified eyewitnesses. Indeed, the journal Aviation Week and Space Technology asserts that one of these aircraft is the Northrop TR3A, now known as Northrop Grumman, a classified tactical reconnaissance vehicle. This plane, about 42 feet long and 60 to 65 feet in wingspan, appears to fly with the F-117s as they pass by one over Antelope Valley. Its engine reportedly runs more quietly than the muffled General Electric F-404 power plants on the stealth fighter. That stealth fighter is the F-117A. Ground observations are inconclusive on whether any vertical control surfaces jut from the aircraft's back. Descriptions suggest that the plane evolved from a top-secret Northrop prototype concocted under the Air Force's original stealth program back in the mid-1970s. According to Aviation Week reports, the vehicle has a range of 3,000 miles. Its mission, to collect tactical, photographic, reconnaissance data and relay target information directly to F-117As in near real time. Apparently dedicated to stealth fighter support, the TR-3A would supplant the RF-4C in carrying out low-level recon runs, if it came into wider use. But if it's capable of high-altitude missions, as Aviation Week suggests, the plane could also be a follow-on to the TR-1, a modern version of the U-2 spy plane. Given the frequency of sightings and the association with F-117As, it's likely that the secret planes are operational and may have seen action during Operation Desert Storm. Other reports of flying wing triangles do not match the TR-3A descriptions. An aircraft with a wingspan close to 150 feet, roughly that of the B-2 stealth bomber, as I just mentioned, has been sighted by observers who insist that they can distinguish the B-2 at night. Unlike the purported TR-3A, this vehicle appears highly maneuverable. One is said to have turned 90 degrees on its wingtip. Not spotted as often as the purported TR-3A, the craft may be a proof-of-concept vehicle for the Navy's now-concealed A-12 attack plane, an older technology demonstrator for the B-2, or a one-off experiment prototype. Go ahead and zoom in here on these 2 images just so you get a chance to see them. Let's see. So we have a distinct from the purported TR-3A. Other triangle craft may serve as concept demonstrators. Descriptions suggest agility and possibly high-speed capacity. You can see that it seems to be ionizing the air below it or some similar process. We see a red glow underneath this plane here in the description. Let's go ahead and continue on. Zoom out a bit so you can see full image here. Another concept by Mark McCandlish. He's the gentleman famous for bringing to light the alien reproduction vehicle story and sketch. Many of you are probably familiar with that. and working on something in the background to put together a little video about that ARV. But let's continue with this article here. Blackbird's progeny. A separate species of air vehicle has been heard more often than seen. Several times in the past 3 years, a window-shaking din has awakened Antelope Valley residents between 3 and 5 a.m. They describe the sound as a low-frequency buffeting or a pulsing roar, like the sky itself is tearing, and distinct from the noise emitted by rocket engines. So they're saying that this has a clear, distinct sound, separate from anything they've heard before. And these people have heard a lot. So what they say about distinct sounds definitely has some weight to it. Observers standing beyond the cast of street lights tell of a swift, high-altitude light that accompanies the pulsing noise. This object did a racetrack turn at high speeds, one witness told Popular Mechanics. Then it shot off with tremendous acceleration. Another said, the light moved from horizon to horizon well over 100 miles in under a minute. The descriptions correlate with reports from Nevada residents and other accounts in Aviation Week. A high-flying, hypersonic vehicle has been the subject of speculation ever since a line item tagged Aurora appeared under a strategic reconnaissance heading in a 1986 Pentagon procurement document. Thought to be a follow-on to the SR-71 Blackbird, analysts have placed Aurora at both Edwards Air Force Base and Nellis Air Force Range. One thing that's interesting to note about the Aurora is for anybody who read Nick Cook's book, Hunt for Zero Point. I think I should correct my statement at the beginning about the author, Gregory T. Pope, not to be confused with Nick Cook. Anyways, Nick Cook saw, when he was interviewing a Lockheed Martin employee at their facility, he saw a poster which basically highlighted the history of Lockheed Martin from their first aircraft all the way up to their most recent. But also on this poster, just on the wall, was an image of something called the Aurora. And so it led him to think that perhaps this was a plane that was being developed or already had been developed but had not yet been publicly recognized. And so it's interesting to see further corroborating evidence of such technologies coming from other places, such as the Strategic Reconnaissance Heading in the Pentagon procurement document, noting a line item tagged for the Aurora. Let's continue. Whether an aircraft codenamed Aurora is operational, experimental, or simply a red herring, an air-breathing vehicle that flies above Mach 6 would probably rely on a novel propulsion method that might explain the pulsing sound. During the 1950s and 1960s, engineers researched external combustion systems whereby a hypersonic aircraft pumps fuel from its midsection into a cone of air bounded by its shock wave. Ignited externally, combustion gases expand around the nozzle surface, shaped by the interface of the shock wave of the aircraft's tapered aft fuselage. Such a system ensures that fuel and air stay in contact long enough to burn at high Mach numbers, says Gerald Gregorek, aeronautical engineering professor at Ohio State University. Even the scramjet, under development for the National Aerospace Plane, may function partially by external combustion. Please turn to page 109. Page 109. Continuing of America's Secret Aircraft. The Big Wing. Meanwhile, several Antelope Valley residents say they've seen a craft that simply strains credulity. According to reports over the past 2 years, a vast black flying wing estimated at between 600 and 800 feet in width has silently passed over city streets, empty deserts, and rural freeways. The craft moved so slowly, one observer said, that he could jog along with it. A pattern of seemingly random white lights on the vehicle's black underside provided constellation camouflage against the starry sky. Observers who followed the craft long enough detailed unlikely maneuvers in which the vehicle stopped, rotated in place, hovered vertically, presenting a thin trailing edge to the ground. Although such sightings encourage those who link the military with unearthly technology, a mammoth, quiet flying wing may have a conventional explanation. It could be a lighter-than aircraft pushed by slow-turning propellers. Certainly, such a vehicle could elude Doppler radar by slowing to a crawl. Alternatively, the fact that the craft holds station vertically suggests that it might serve as a huge reflector for a bistatic radar system. Other possible missions include troop delivery or covert surveillance. Now, anybody who has researched the UFO field may have heard of something called aerogel, and it's possible that this craft may be utilizing an aerogel technology. Aerogel is simply a material that's actually lighter than air. In the case of the quality, the top shelf aerogels, they're actually capable of sustaining a vacuum. If you were to create, for example, a sphere, a hollow sphere of aerogel, you could pump out the air, and that thing would literally just float. So some people think that that may be the source of some of the UFOs that are seen, would be a lighter than air aerogel-based craft. Now, if you put on some hoses on that thing and sucked air in and sucked air out, blew air out, you could basically shoot around at weird maneuvers and basically have something that seems otherworldly. So keep that in mind. Something that we may be hearing about in the future is aerogel. Continuing on, black and white. Sightings of all these aircraft may offer a preview of the 21st century air power, or they may be hints of experimentation, hardware versions of engineering concepts. Denied classified data, experts must simply guess. In the late 1970s, says Wolfgang Demisch, an aerospace analyst with UBS Securities, there was concern at senior levels of government that a lot of technology was about to disappear because people were close to retirement. Projects in the 1980s may have pushed this technology as a way of maintaining the national capability built up in the 50s and 60s. Masking such capability behind classified special access status has been the trend for the past decade. But that trend is shifting now. The growing number of unofficial sightings may signal that security will soon lift. Just as the F-117A went public because daytime flight requirements would reveal the aircraft anyway, if the black air vehicles now prowling desert skies also venture into the white world, technology spin-offs may be enormous. If not, then these aircraft will remain America's most closely guarded secret. And that's the end of the article from Popular Mechanics, December 1991, by Gregory T. Pope. I want to thank you for joining me, going through that together. I think I'll probably have a lot more of these in the future for you. And let's just take one more long look here at the alleged TR3A craft. As I mentioned at the beginning, the B-2 stealth bomber seems, based on its characteristics, i.e. its weight, as well as the altitude with which it flies, reports indicate that that vehicle is actually too heavy to fly at such altitudes. If you think about it, there's actually a lot less air when you get up to 50, 60, 70, 80, 90,000 feet. And your plane just simply won't fly, especially if it's pretty big, at those kind of heights. So one thing that's been suggested is that that B-2 stealth bomber actually ionizes the air in front of it and behind it, in the sense that it charges the leading edge of the plane. That leading edge is the front with a positive charge, basically stripping off electrons from the air molecules in front of the craft, and a negative charge being applied to the rear of the craft. If anybody's researched the work of Thomas Townsend Brown, you'll know that he discovered that within a capacitor, if you set it up properly, the negative side of that capacitor will actually try to chase the positive side of the capacitor. And so this is potentially a scaled up version being applied to the B-2 stealth bomber. Something to keep an eye out in the future. But just to wrap this up, I just want to note how little has changed in the last 30 plus years since 1991. Doesn't really seem like we've really learned a whole lot more. So hopefully that can change soon. I know this article indicated that maybe they thought the secrecy was going to be lifting, but that doesn't seem to be the case, at least here in July of 2024. So if this is something that you care about, consider contacting your representatives and asking them to investigate these kinds of things. The Pentagon, for example, has never passed an audit. So we have an organization that we're putting our tax dollars towards that isn't being honest about where that money is going. So I think that we deserve answers to that. And if you agree with me, maybe consider contacting your representatives. I'll provide a link to do so in the description of this video. And if enough people express that this is important to them, we might be able to get something going here. So thanks again for joining me. Once again, if you're liking this kind of stuff, if you're enjoying the show, the interviews, the discussions, the magazine readings, consider subscribing, throw a like on this video, and hit that notification bell. And comment on the video. Let me know what you think about this. Have you ever seen a triangle-shaped craft? If you have, I would love to get you on and do an interview with you. You can also find my email for contact and for interview suggestions in the description of this video. I'll see you in the next one.